Welcome back to DFC Books. Today, we are taking on a monumental and, let's be honest, a truly terrifying work of literature. We're going to stack up the source material and break it all down until you feel like you've lived inside its deepest, most necessary truths. We are diving deep into José Saramago's allegorical novel, Blindness. And before we even get to the plot, we have to talk about the concept at its core, which is just, it's stomach-dropping. Imagine an instant, widespread plague. But it doesn't plunge its victims into comforting darkness. No. It replaces everything with a blinding, infinite white light. The sources call it a terrifying milky sea.
It is an utterly shattering work, and not just because of the subject matter, but because of what Saramago is doing with it. This is so much more than a disaster thriller.
Oh, absolutely.
He's using this premise really as a scalpel to dissect human nature, to look at how fragile our society actually is, and ultimately to ask what we even mean when we talk about sight.
And the brilliance of it, or maybe this psychological weapon of it, is tied directly to his famous writing style, his stylistic eccentricity.
For anyone who hasn't read it, you should know, the prose is intentionally confusing. There are no quotation marks. Conversations and actions just flow into each other.
That's right. And it's so deliberate. The source material talks about the subtlety and beauty of the language, but the way it's delivered is key. The lack of punctuation, those long run-on sentences, it forces you into this uncomfortable closeness with the text. Dialogue and inner thoughts, they just merge. And the feeling you get is that the story is unfolding, as the source says, with the seamless and threatening peculiarity of a nightmare.
So you, the reader, are meant to feel a little lost.
Exactly. You're experiencing a literary version of the epidemic itself, which is such a conscious choice. He's destabilizing you, the reader, to mirror how quickly society becomes destabilized. And on top of that, there are no real names. We only know people by their roles. The doctor, the doctor's wife, the first blind man. Why do that? Why is he so insistent on keeping them anonymous in that way?
Well, by stripping away names, he immediately gets rid of individuality and, class. These aren't people defined by their personal history or their specific identity. They become archetypes.
Universal stand-ins for us.
Yes. For us, the readers, being put through this extreme test, the focus shifts immediately from who they were to what they do when everything falls apart. And it forces you to ask yourself, if I were just reduced to my function, doctor, wife, thief, how would I act? It's essential for the book to work as a social allegory.
Which brings us to our mission for you today. You want a clear roadmap through this collapse. So we're going to provide a detailed breakdown of these core characters. We'll analyze what drives them as they descend into chaos, and we'll trace the most crucial events that take humanity from civilization to utter degradation, and then somehow back again. So let's begin at the very beginning, moment zero, the instant the white sickness arrives. And it doesn't start with some big global announcement. It starts with one guy stop at a perfectly ordinary traffic light.
And this man is immediately known to us as the first blind man, the FBM. And the environment is so important. He's at a crosswalk, zebra crossing.
Stepping on the white stripes.
He's literally stepping on the white stripes, painted on the road at the exact moment his world turns completely white. That detail is not an accident.
No.
He is enveloped by the very color of the lines that are supposed to define order and safety.
And his description of it is the defining horror of the novel. He doesn't see black. He doesn't see a void. He says, I see everything white.
Like a milky sea. And that's not just a physical symptom. It's so loaded with symbolism.
How so?
Well, think about it. Traditional blindness, darkness, can almost feel protective. It suggests you're not seeing things, maybe ignorance. But this white light is the opposite. It's an excessive, totally unusable illumination. It's like information overload, where you can't distinguish anything.
So it's a clarity that shows you nothing.
Exactly. An oppressive clarity that renders the world meaningless. It's arguably so much more terrifying than darkness, because the light is still there, but it doesn't give you any shape or meaning.
And right after this happens, we see the first little crack in society's moral foundation. And it's what accelerates the whole contagion. The FBM is stranded, he's terrified, and he accepts help from a passerby.
A man who we immediately come to know as the car thief.
The false Samaritan.
Yes. He seems like he's just offering basic human decency. But even in his shock, the FBM feels a little suspicious. He notes that the thief's zeal suddenly struck the blind man as being suspect.
He feels that something's off.
It's that first ripple. Even in a moment of just profound vulnerability, you don't get pure, selfless compassion.
And the car thief, seeing this perfect opportunity, a running car, a helpless victim in the middle of the road, he betrays that trust almost immediately. steals the keys, and drives off. It's this tiny tragedy of greed.
And Saramago actually pauses the narrative here for one of his classic judgments. He notes that while the opportunity does not always make the thief, it is also true that it helps a lot.
Right. This isn't some master criminal.
No, just a simple car thief who saw a chance that was too good to pass up. And that scene is really a miniature test for the entire book. If people fail this simple test of integrity when the stakes are this low, what's going to happen when the stakes are food and life?
It's a dark forecast. So the FBM's wife, who can still see at this point, she gets him to the nearest expert she can think of, the doctor, the ophthalmologist.
And he represents the scientific, rational approach to a problem, the approach that is about to be completely and utterly invalidated.
He does a full exam right. He uses all his tools. He's turning finely adjusted knobs, looking deep into the eye.
And he finds nothing. Absolutely nothing. The cornea, the retina, the iris, everything is, as the book says, perfect.
Which has to be the most terrifying part for him.
It is. The medical instruments of our civilization cannot even see the problem. It's systemic or spiritual or something else entirely, but it's not physical.
So this intellectual terror just grips him. He goes home and he's desperate to categorize this thing. He's looking at agnosia, which is where the brain can't interpret what the eye sees.
Versus amaurosis, which is total, usually black, blindness.
Yeah.
And his patient's white vision. It doesn't fit either category. He's sitting there, surrounded by centuries of medical knowledge.
And that very night, the expert himself becomes a victim.
Yes. In a final sort of intellectual act, he's gathering books to put back on his shelf when the whiteness just engulfs him.
And he knows immediately.
With a cold certainty. He knows he was infected by that patient. And in that moment, a personal tragedy becomes a terrifying public health catastrophe. His books, his expertise, his whole identity, it's all useless.
And watching this all happen is the single most important character in the entire novel, the doctor's wife. She sees him go blind, she looks in his eyes, and she realizes that she's been spared. She's the only one.
And this is her big existential choice, right then and there. She is the anomaly, the one person who can see in a world that is rapidly going blind. And she has some medical training. She understands contagion. She remembers her husband saying earlier that trying to prescribe something would be like prescribing in the dark.
And she realizes that telling anyone about her own sight would be like that for her.
It would be. It would turn her into an object, either a specimen to be locked away and studied, or a forced servant for millions of helpless people.
So she chooses silence. She pretends she's blind and decides to go with her husband.
An act of just supreme courage, but also one that comes with this instant crushing loneliness. She's just accepted a burden that nobody else can even comprehend.
Okay, so the disease is now confirmed to be spreading. And spreading fast. The government's reaction is what you'd expect. Immediate, fearful, and completely inadequate.
They implement a mandatory quarantine. They start rounding people up, viewing them not as patients, but as carriers of the white evil.
And the place they choose for this quarantine is a derelict old mental asylum.
Which is just so symbolic. A place already associated with abandonment, confinement, a place designed to hold people who had lost their minds, now repurposed for people who have lost their sight.
The doctor and his wife are in the very first group to be collected. And the people they find themselves with are the very same people the doctor had just seen in his office hours before.
And this forms our core group, the microcosm of society that we follow through the whole story. You have the doctor and his wife, the first blind man and his wife, and then they're joined by 3 others from the doctor's office.
Right. There's the boy with the squint, who's this young, sensitive kid.
And the girl with dark glasses, who went blind, somewhat scandalously, while she was with a man in a hotel room.
And then in this moment of what must be just grim satisfaction for the doctor's wife,
the car thief, now blind himself, injured, and totally helpless.
She had wished him blind, and now fate or the sickness has delivered.
It's a kind of poetic justice, but it comes at a huge cost. Because his blindness is just proof that this thing is universal. It hits everyone. It confirms the total breakdown of order is coming.
So this quarantine forces all these strangers together.
People who had, these tangential, sometimes even hostile relationships are now forced into this intimate cooperative unit.
And once they're inside, the government lays out the rules, and they do it in the most impersonal way possible.
Through a loudspeaker. A disembodied, booming voice that just emphasizes the distance between the state and the victims.
What are the rules?
They're brutal. The lights will stay on 24/7, which is useless for them and deeply ironic.
Of course.
If you try to leave, it's instant death. They're told to self-organize, to elect representatives, which is just a futile hope.
How could they?
And most critically, food will be deposited in containers at the main door 3 times a day. And that's it. The government expects them to do their duty, but offers zero support inside those walls.
In the reality of that, the initial degradation, it hits them on the very first night. This isn't just about being confined. It's a war against filth.
The conditions are just appalling. The source material describes these dingy rooms, littered floors, and the horrific state of the latrines. And the doctor's wife, because of her secret site, is immediately forced into this unwanted leadership role. She has to guide people through the dark to the foul-smelling latrines.
He's horrified.
Completely. She finds old straitjackets in a cupboard, this morbid reminder of where they are and what their situation is becoming.
And it's those visceral details that really show the rapid descent.
Right.
Like the boy with the squint.
Yes, he's so disoriented and terrified that he can't hold it. He wets his trousers. It's this profound humiliation.
That's how Saramago shows the loss of dignity, isn't it? It's not in some grand tragedy.
No, it's in the small, embarrassing failures of basic physical control. And you see it again with the car thief. He's helpless now, and he cuts his leg badly on some debris on the floor.
And the doctor's wife, who justifiably hated him, has to step in.
She has to. She improvises a bandage out of his own vest to wrap the wound.
Which is hugely symbolic.
It is. She is forced to be a caregiver to the very man she cursed. Her private morality, her prejudice, it all has to be surrendered to the immediate collective need for first aid.
She has to put the group's survival above her own feeling.
Exactly. Saramago is telling us very clearly that the charitable, picturesque world of the little blind orphans is finished. They're not just victims to be pitied anymore. They're a pack of beings, identified only by sound and smell and their reliance on each other.
And the doctor's wife knows the weight of this. She thinks that if her husband actually saw what she was seeing, he'd probably wish he were blind too, just to be spared the horror.
So as things collapse outside the walls, the anarchy inside just accelerates. The government's fragile system completely disintegrates.
Right, the breakdown of supplies and governance.
The soldiers guarding the place get more and more scared. They're negligent. They don't want to go near the food containers because they're afraid of catching the white evil.
And then comes the final tipping point.
One of the soldiers right at the gate is struck blind himself.
Which proves the containment has failed.
Completely. The remaining soldiers just flee. And the doctor's group realizes they are utterly, totally abandoned. No more food is coming. No more orders from the outside. They're on their own.
And with that external authority gone, a power vacuum opens up. And it's filled almost instantly by this ruthless criminal element.
The blind thugs of the Third Ward.
These are internees from another wing of the asylum.
Yes, the left-wing Third Ward. And Saramago makes them immediately identifiable by their language. It's a rough voice, he says. They're used to giving orders. They seize control of the food, the one essential resource, and they're armed. They have a gun they found, and they have sticks and cudgels. They institute a tyranny based on extortion.
And the doctor, he tries to appeal to the old order, right? He tries to assert his authority as a man of science, of status.
And the thug leader's response is just immediate and absolute. He says, we're all equal here, and you don't give me any orders.
That's the declaration of the New World.
It is. Education, wealth, status, it's all meaningless. The only currency now is force and control over resources.
So the doctor's group is forced into what the book calls the sacrifice of possessions.
They have to give up their last tokens of their old lives. Watches, rings, earrings, even the doctor's wedding band.
All for just a few scraps of food.
It's a critical psychological turning point. They are literally trading their memories for survival. And the doctor's wife has to facilitate this painful exchange, which just reinforces her role as the reluctant guide and reminds everyone of how vulnerable they are.
But the situation spirals even further. It goes from just economic exploitation to something much, much darker.
After they've established control, the thugs send a new message.
The demand for women.
Yes, they demand women in exchange for food.
This is the absolute moral low point of the novel.
It is. It's where human dignity is reduced to a bargaining chip for calories. The women in the ward, they protest, of course. They refuse to pay for food with what they had between their legs.
But the brutal logic of starvation takes over.
They realize they have to comply, or their entire ward will die.
Which triggers this agonizing debate about the price of dignity, and it centers on the first blind man.
The FBM, he reacts with this sort of patriarchal rage. He shouts that his wife will not go, that dignity has no price. He's appealing to an ethical code that just doesn't exist in there anymore.
And the response comes from the girl with dark glasses.
Yes, who is facing the reality of it. And she gives this cold, heartbreaking retort. She asked him how that dignity will taste when he's eating the bread that she helped to earn.
And he has no answer.
His words just tailed off. He's left humiliated and silent. And that moment is so important. It exposes dignity as a luxury, a product of a stable society that's been instantly revoked.
And this compliance, this terrible decision, it sets the stage for the assault and the retaliation. The doctor's wife leads the women to the third ward.
And she is forced to witness this unspeakable brutality. One woman, the one who suffered from insomnia, is violently assaulted and killed.
And you have to imagine what's going through the doctor's wife's mind. She is the only one who sees it. The faces of the men, the filth, the body of the dead woman.
Her rage just becomes overwhelming. It completely overrides any fear she has left. She realizes she's not just protecting these women anymore. She's protecting the very idea of humanity.
So she pulls out the weapon she's been hiding?
A pair of long, finely pointed scissors. And she murders the leader of the thugs. Slits his throat.
The book is so unflinching in its description. A spurt of blood splashed onto her face.
It's the most profound moral crisis in the entire novel. She uses her sight, her secret power, to commit this necessary but irredeemable act of violence.
She has to break the fundamental law of civilization to preserve some fragment of it.
Exactly. And she immediately declares that she'll remember the faces, the voices of the others. She's putting a death sentence on them.
And she knows what she's done. She confesses, I've killed a man, I wanted to kill him, and I have.
In that act, she's become blind in a way, regardless of her physical sight. But that violence, it secures a temporary bloody freedom, and it forces the story toward its next confrontation.
So with the leader dead, the remaining thugs are thrown into chaos.
There's a blind accountant who tries to take over. He's frantically looking for the gun, but he just doesn't have the same authority, the same brutality.
And the doctors group sees this as their chance.
They realize the power dynamic has shifted, but the danger is still there. So they organize this desperate, silent plan.
They take off their shoes to mask their approach.
To attack the third ward, get the food back, and end the tyranny for good.
And they move toward the ward, but the thugs have barricaded themselves in.
They've created this final barricade with beds. It's almost impossible to get through. The fight that follows is just chaos, and it results in more loss for the doctor's ward.
The pharmacist's assistant and another man are killed.
Right. And the assault just stalls at the barricade. And this is the moment where the doctor's wife fully accepts her role as the seeing leader. She throws all caution aside.
She knows a direct assault won't work.
It's suicide. So she uses the other secret tool she had, cigarette lighter.
She sets the barricade on fire.
She creates a pyre. And the source material describes the sound. Cries of rage and fear, the howls of pain and agony as the fire spreads and traps the rest of the thugs inside the burning ward.
It's a necessary catastrophe.
It's a way of erasing the tyranny through annihilation. And that fire, it provides the ultimate chaos and the cover for their liberation.
As the smoke fills the entire compound, the group flees toward the main gate.
And the doctor's wife is still expecting to hear gunfire from the guards. She's rushing forward. But then she makes this final devastating discovery.
The soldiers are gone.
They've been taken by the disease, too.
Yeah.
And the realization just hits with this crushing finality. Everyone finally blind.
The asylum is open. They're free.
But they're free into a world that they cannot possibly comprehend.
Stepping out of that asylum into the devastated city, it must have been an incredible shock. How does Saramago describe this post-sight world?
It's the instant collapse of all the infrastructure we take for granted. Cars are just scattered everywhere, abandoned in the middle of a journey. The streets are covered in garbage and filth because sanitation stopped the moment the drivers went blind.
And people are just
wandering in groups, bumping into cars, just forging. They run into blind street preachers declaring it's the end of the world. Civilization isn't just degraded, it's physically decaying.
And the doctors group, now 7 of them, they have to adapt to this new world immediately. And they get a new companion.
They do. They pick up a stray dog who they name the Dog of Tears.
Why that now?
Because it licks the tears from one of the women's faces, and the dog becomes this sort of elemental connection to loyalty to nature. It reinforces their identity as this nomadic pack just trying to survive.
And they have to forage for everything. Food, clothes, shoes.
In these ransacked shops, constantly relying on the doctor's wife's sight to guide them.
And during this foraging, they eventually find their way to the first blind man's apartment, but it's already occupied.
Yes, by a really unique character. the blind writer.
And he's important because he's a contrast to the brutality they've just survived.
He is. He's polite, he's educated, and even though he's lost his vision, he's still trying to create. He's still engaged in an intellectual pursuit. He's proof that while society has crumbled, the human instinct for art and meaning is still there.
Tell us about how he writes. It's a fascinating detail about adapting.
It's a tactile writing method he calls anaglyptography. He uses a ballpoint pen and presses down really hard on paper that's placed over something soft.
So he can feel the lines.
Exactly. He uses the indentation of the line above to guide his hand across the page so he doesn't overlap his sentences.
But the tragic irony of it all
Is that he tells them now nobody can read them. It is as if they did not exist. His creations are just for him. They're personal affirmations, completely disconnected from an audience, which proves that the drive to create is innate, even when no one is there to see it.
So the group has survived the tyranny inside the asylum and the anarchy outside. And now they begin this slow, painful process of healing, of trying to find stability and memory and pieces of their former lives. They're a real family unit now.
Forged by fire, absolutely. And this part of the novel is all about seeking memory and home. They try to anchor themselves to the past by visiting places from their old lives. The girl with dark glasses house, the doctor's surgery.
And they find everything ransacked. Their old lives are just gone.
Gone. Although the doctor finds his ophthalmological instruments are mostly intact, and he says that's at least something, a remnant of his identity that still has a physical form, even if he can't use it.
But their search for the past brings them more than just sad memories. It brings them face to face with the horror of what others went through.
It does. That's the darkest discovery. At the girl's house, they find the body of her old blind neighbor.
The man who had been eating raw meat.
Yes, they have to confront this absolute animalistic state of survival. And they realize they have to provide a human ritual for this stranger. The doctor's wife digs a grave, this meticulous physical act of labor, and she plants a rose bush over it. It's a small but necessary act of restoring dignity to the dead, which is such a contrast to the mass undignified deaths back in the asylum.
And amidst all this horror, Saramago finally allows for the return of human connection, of affection.
It's the reclamation of their fundamental humanity. The old man with the black eye patch and the girl with dark glasses decide to live together as a couple.
Which is so significant.
It is. The girl, who has suffered such profound trauma, is loved unconditionally by the old man. And his simple, heartfelt declaration, "The man I still am, loves the woman you are."
It shows that love transcends all of that. The trauma, the appearance.
Everything. It's proof that the human spirit has survived. And you see it with the doctor and his wife, too. Their shared, terrible secret has created this unbreakable intimacy between them.
But the moral weight on the doctor's wife is just immense. Her sight saved them, but it also forced her into this constant state of guilt.
This burden just culminates during a final trip for food. She had found a storeroom in a supermarket basement full of food, which saved them.
But when she goes back,
She finds a cluster of decomposing bodies. Blind people who died trying to get into that storeroom after she'd left. And she realizes that because she closed the door behind her to hide the supplies, she inadvertently sealed their tomb.
and she just breaks down.
Completely. She takes all the responsibility, saying she's to blame for turning the basement into an enormous tomb.
Her husband tries to reason with her.
He does. He tells her she can't take on the guilt for the whole epidemic. He says, "I don't want you to start burdening yourself with imaginary guilt when you already have a hard enough time shouldering the responsibility for 6 real and useless mouths."
But her sight forces her to see the consequences in a way no one else can.
And seeking some rest, they go into a nearby church, and all the statues, all the religious icons, have had their eyes covered with cloths. It's this poignant symbol of faith failing during the crisis. The doctor is describing this to his wife when suddenly the miracle begins.
The doctor gets his sight back.
Yeah, just like that. As instant and as unexplained as when he lost it. He first perceives that the inside of his eyelids turned dark, shifting from white to black. And then he can see.
He's afraid he's just gone from one kind of blindness to another.
From light to dark, yes. But he quickly realizes he can perceive the world again. It's a biological event that defies all medical explanation.
And as the group is processing this miracle back at the apartment, they realize it's not just him.
They start to hear shouting from the streets below. And the collective voice of the city, which had been just whimpers and confusion, is now this frantic, joyous cry.
I can see.
The white sickness is reversing, just as abruptly and mysteriously as it arrived.
And the final terrifying image of the book involves the doctor's wife. She's looking out the window at this returning chaos, and she feels this profound personal fear. She looks up at the sky, and everything turns white again. She thinks, it is my turn.
Fearing she'll be the one left behind in the light. But this time, it passes.
And that moment just encapsulates her entire journey, doesn't it?
It does. She has endured the deepest, most morally challenging kind of sight, and now she faces the terror of losing it just as everyone else gets theirs back. And this leads us right to Saramago's ultimate philosophical point, delivered by the doctor's wife.
Right. Her husband asks her, why did we go blind? What is the final allegorical answer that the book leaves us with?
Her reply is just devastating, and it's absolute. She says, I don't think we did go blind. I think we are blind. Blind but seeing. Blind people who can see but do not see.
And that's the core thesis.
That's it. The true epidemic wasn't the physical sickness. It was a moral and social blindness, a failure to see and act with compassion, a refusal to recognize the suffering of others. They only got their physical sight back after they had endured the worst of humanity and reestablished their moral vision through sacrifice and care.
This has been a necessary and a very uncomfortable journey through one of the most powerful allegories in modern literature. We watched civilization just break down piece by piece, only to be rebuilt by this small, nameless family, led by the woman who was forced to see absolutely everything.
And to recap that journey, from the raw greed of the car thief to the moral compromises of the doctor and the heroic but terrible actions of the doctor's wife, the novel meticulously shows how our social structures are held up not by laws from on high, but by this fragile daily consensus and moral responsibility from below.
And for you, our learner, who has journeyed with us through the filth of that asylum and the chaos of the city, there are 3 key takeaways we hope you'll take with you from this deep dive.
First, remember that structural choice. The characters are defined not by names, but by their roles and their moral responses to a crisis. Saramago strips away the individual to test the universal human spirit. You have to look past the person to the archetype.
Second, the white sickness is the ultimate test. It proves that critical thinking, moral courage, and compassion, which are all epitomized by the doctor's wife's agonizing choices, are the highest forms of sight. True blindness is selfishness and apathy.
And third, that final recovery. It's not a convenient plot device. It's a sociological realization. They only recovered their sight after enduring the depths of degradation and, more importantly, after reestablishing those basic, fundamental human bonds: love, community, and shared responsibility. The light only came back when they learned how to use their moral eyes again.
And here's the final provocative thought we want to leave you with. The only person who never lost her physical sight was the one who was forced to see the absolute worst of humanity: the rape, the filth, the starvation, the murder. She was the one driven to perform the most violent, necessary acts to save her companions. So if retaining your sight requires you to survive that much horror, to murder a man and burn others alive, is that sight truly a blessing? Is it a gift of clarity? Or is it the most unbearable curse Saramago could inflict upon a soul? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.